It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Quarterbacks. It's the topic of the day. We talked about it with Steve Daniel, the last podcast. I think we have to dive deeper into it here. Heath, when we talk about quarterbacks, there's two things that we can look at. One, passing accuracy is up. It's also the style of play that has morphed in the CFL. The second part of the equation, injuries all over the place. Something we talk about year after year, and I'm beginning to lose count, but do we have any quarterbacks that have played every game other than Bo Levi Mitchell? He's the only one.
I'm trying to go through the list here. Bo Levi Mitchell, who is at this point a likely front runner for MOP should he stay healthy, because he has found the fountain of youth and looks fantastic out there. He's connecting with those receivers. The addition of Kenny Lawler has been huge for him. If he keeps on this pace, I think he's a runaway MOP. The rest of them, we've got players, we've got quarterbacks benched, we've got quarterbacks with non-contact injuries, we've got quarterbacks with contact injuries, with illegal contact injuries. We're kind of running the whole gamut of situations with the quarterbacks in the league.
The upshot of it all is that we look at the lineups every week to see who's going to be starting. Where there's question marks galore when it comes to what's happening this week, for example. But when we talk about the only quarterback that's really been benched, it's Trey Ford of the Edmonton Elks. Your thoughts on that whole process of having Ford on the bench in Regina, a place where he's had success?
I understand where the Elks were coming from, especially with Cody Fajardo as their backup quarterback, who also has had a lot of success in Saskatchewan, more notably with the Rough Riders. I think they were trying to get a bit of a spark with Fajardo back in Saskatchewan and try to really rally them to a win. It's pretty clear that Trey Ford has struggled this year. We saw flashes of brilliance in a couple of games this season. If you look at his history as a starting quarterback in the league as well, what he did with the Elks was he found a way to win games. It's not always that he's going to put up the juicy stats, but he was finding a way. And right now, as a team, the Elks are struggling to support him in that, and they're not finding ways to win these games.
Edmonton, for 3/4 of that football game, other than one period where they went down and got stuffed by the Rough Riders, they rarely crossed midfield in that football game. And Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District, who graciously stepped in while you were away, bless him and I were going back and forth texting each other about what needs to be done. I was in favor of putting Ford in the back half of that football game, thinking that Fajardo was just not escaping the rush. He was a little bit more adamant about another possibility of something to do. I won't get into it just yet, but if the Elks were going to change something, was the quarterbacking the biggest problem, or could you go one step higher and even question Jordan McSimic? Is he not really understanding that offense and what he needs to get from those players?
You've got a very unique quarterback in Trey Ford, and I think there needs to be game plans around that. And I understand he's been injured running in the past, so you're skeptical of having a lot of quarterback running plays, but that escapability, that moving the pocket, all those sorts of things play more into his style as a QB, and that can lead to success. One of the knocks on Cody Fajardo has always been that he hangs on to the ball too long, and the sacks just continued to pile up by the Rough Riders against the Elks and Cody Fajardo. You can point the finger somewhat to that offensive line not giving him that protection, but also the old habits of Cody hanging onto the ball too long crept up and was allowing some of those defensive linemen to get home. I also need to give credit to that defensive line of the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. They are on a tear this year and were dominant in keeping the Elks and Fajardo in check.
For Fajardo, I agree that he does like to keep the ball too long. He also spins clockwise to get away from pressure. For most part in that football game, those sacks I wouldn't put on him. Saskatchewan was blowing up that offensive line of Edmonton. And if you're Jordan McSimic and you haven't got an offensive line that can keep 4 rushers at bay, then what are you left with doing? And is it your fault? No, it's got to be the talent pool or the coaching. One of the two has got to improve so that you can protect whomever is back there at quarterback. We've seen Tre Ford run for his life a couple times this year. Cody Fajardo, he's a little bit bigger body. He can take more hits, but you don't want him to. And 8 sacks in a football game is just horrendous. It's a bad look. Now, immediately the offensive line gets picked on, but was it coaching strategy? Was it something else that was going on? And Cody Fajardo, for all his warts coming out of that game being turfed so many times by the Rough Rider defense, he put it on himself. He said, that's not their fault, that's my fault, which I'm really impressed with, because if I'm getting knocked around that much, I'd be second guessing that a little bit.
The other point to consider with that Edmonton Elks offensive line is, are they a better run blocking offensive line than they are a pass protection line? And you've got Javon Leake and Justin Rankin, 2 different styles of running back who have had a lot of success. Last year, the Elks ran the ball like crazy and put up huge rushing numbers. Tre Ford, you add him into the mix as well with those 2 running backs, and that's a dynamic that can move the ball, keep drives going. The Elks seem to have abandoned that, and unfortunately, the end result is you've got a quarterback trying to find open receivers and getting lit up.
And we saw with McSimic when he had his quarterbacks in BC, he had Nathan Rourke obviously have his massive breakout year, and passing was the focus of that. The Lions rarely ran the football. That's sort of a McSimic trademark. You look at Jarius Jackson, who was the O coordinator last year, there was a lot more emphasis on running, and the Elks did excel, especially the back half of the season. If the Elks are going to find their way, I agree with you. Rankin and Leake have to see the ball, even just put them out of the backfield with short dump passes or something, but they've got to do more quick hit stuff, because so much of their offense is built on longer developing plays. And we saw that with Ford. He had to wait on receivers. We saw that with Fajardo. He had to wait on receivers to clear, to get open. If you need an extra second and a half and your offensive line can't provide it, then you better start rethinking what you're doing.
Just quickly looking at the stats of that game, counting Cody Fajardo running the ball, there was 9 rushing attempts in total. 3 for Justin Rankin, 2 for Javon Leake. That doesn't breed success in that running game. You talk about getting the ball into their hands in other ways. Rankin was targeted 6 times. He had 4 catches, and Javon Leake was 2 for 2. So again, you've got 5 rushing attempts combined between the two, another 6 touches. That only gets you 11 from those 2 studs in that offensive backfield. And I think that's a big mistake by Jordan McSimic and this offense.
It's funny how it's said around the league that you have to have a rushing attack to balance what you do on offense. And every team seems to want to emphasize it. There are teams in this league that just don't want to bother. They want to go a different tack, which is their prerogative. However, when you've got talented people, why you're paying them to do something? What are you paying them to do? That's where I always have a struggle with all of this. I get it that Tre Ford is still in their plans. Their head coach has said that, yes, he's still factoring in, but he's got to learn some more about how to be a starting quarterback. And I get that. Okay, experience is a wonderful thing, but you maybe need more coaching up. Great. That's fantastic. But then Cody Fajardo gets out there. You got the same result in terms of scoreboard. Granted, it wasn't 34 yards of passing. It was over 300.
We saw the previous coaching regime hang on to Taylor Cornelius as the number 1 quarterback for too long, with Tre Ford essentially rotting on the bench. I don't know how much of a leash you want to give him, but you are building a lot of your new team identity around Tre Ford. Cody Fajardo does provide them a pretty capable backup when he's on. This game was a rocky one. I'm not going to give any excuses, but they've got a 1-2 punch that I think they need to continue to develop. I still believe that Trey Ford can win games as a starting quarterback in this league. They just need to be coming up with a better game plan for how he plays the game.
I would agree. I think if you're going to anoint him as your starter at the beginning of the year, you've got to stay with him. Let him figure out some of this stuff while he's playing the game. Pulling him, they did that in a game earlier in the season where he sat out a couple of series. Why coaches do that, I'll never understand. If you're going to put in your backup, put him in and when the game is either out of hand one way or out of hand the other way. But you don't put him in the middle of the game when it's on the line. I don't ever get that. Hey, if you're Mark Killam, that's what you want to do. That's your prerogative. That's your coaching strategy. Seriously, if you're going to spend the money, spend the effort, put Trey Ford out there. And again, remember, against this Rough Riders defense, he's done quite well in the past.
There's no clear model of a quarterback in this league. The CFL Hall of Fame is full of quarterbacks of different styles. You've got a Tracy Ham, a Damon Allen, and a Doug Flutie, and you've got classic pocket passers like Anthony Calvillo and Danny McManus. Those are some of the greatest quarterbacks we've seen over the last 30 years, and very different styles. So you don't need to be set on this guy needs to drop back 3 steps and sling it as quickly as possible. There's room for all of them, and different styles make for exciting games.
Remember, too, that for Damon Allen, not so much maybe, but for Tracy Ham especially, they were running quarterbacks at the beginning of their career, and at the end of their career, they were pocket quarterbacks. It takes time to develop. It takes time to work it through.
Having not suited up for a game yet this season, the Toronto Argonauts have now officially placed QB Chad Kelly on the 6-game injured list. A lot of different stories coming out of Toronto and Buffalo with Chad Kelly and his recovery process. This to me feels like it's a little bit late to add him to the 6th game. Maybe they were more hopeful than they should have been with his recovery early on this season.
It does speak to that, having an understanding of how severe that injury was to him. He broke both bones in his lower leg. That's a humongous injury to have to endure. Any timeline that put him back within a year was always going to be questionable unless everything went absolutely swimmingly, and it probably hasn't. For Chad Kelly, going on the 6th game, still gets his salary, but now the Argonauts have relief against the cap. And you could have done this from the very beginning if you were concerned. You could have put Chad Kelly on the 6th game right off the first game of the season, just put him on 6. And if you came back early, yes, everything counts against the cap. But if he doesn't come back early, you're far better with your cap. And by doing this, the Argonauts now do give themselves cap relief. It doesn't mean that their salary structure is going to go down. It just means that what counts against the cap will.
It was indicated pretty early on this season that they weren't expecting him back before week 7 anyway. So it's a bit of a head scratcher as to why they didn't put him on the 6th game at the start of the season. Hopefully he's back sooner than that 6-game stretch now, because you want to have the best players on the field. What Chad Kelly has done behind that offensive line in Toronto has been pretty exemplary in his short career as the number 1 quarterback in Toronto. You want to see him healthy and compete. Now, we're not going to get into the off-field implications and whether or not you feel he should be on the team. We've now got a player that is cleared to play, has played, and hopefully comes back soon.
Nick Arbuckle in the interim, though, his play has improved week to week, and we saw it especially this last game out. Nick Arbuckle, as he becomes more comfortable in this offense, understands what Ryan Dinwiddie wants to do in that offense. He's going to become much more settled, and he may be the quarterback of record for the rest of the season. We don't know how this rehab is going. We're not privy to that information. All we do know is what the Argos let out in as sort of nuggets of information, which is it's another week. Maybe there was a setback. Maybe there wasn't. I kind of lean towards him not being back almost till the end of September. I just don't see how you put him on the 6th game now. You're pushing it into September. You give him an extra couple of weeks. You put him in for the stretch run if you feel that you need that.
It's not a bad backup plan to have the reigning Grey Cup MVP as your number 2 quarterback, and at this point, QB of note. I've been critical of Nick Arbuckle in the past, as have many fans and pundits of the CFL. He's had some up and down games this season, but he seems to have the Blue Bombers number for one thing. He puts up some great numbers and some great games when he's playing against the Blue and Gold.
He does that. Even in the season that he barely started with the Argonauts, the one team he did beat was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Argos are on a 4-game winning streak against the Blue Bombers right now, going into Winnipeg. And of course, now let's talk about Zach Collaros. This is a quarterback biased beginning, but hey, we've got to talk about Zach Collaros. He has that neck injury. That goes all the way back to when he was with the Rough Riders in a preseason game where he gets sacked at his own goal line. And I remember watching that play and thinking, ouch, that must have really hurt. And he comes off the field and he's not feeling good. I remember Chris Jones just beside himself for allowing Collaros to even be out there in what could have been a moment in time that he didn't have to play. Collaros misses the next couple of games, comes back in Ottawa, gets hit again, and is out again. It's his neck as much as anything that has really hampered him. He's been very fortunate in Winnipeg that he hasn't had any aggravation of it, although the hit he took last year in Edmonton when he was on the ground, I think that was Pelly that got to him. There could have been a real exacerbation of that injury. Luckily, nothing came of that. What happened in that hit that he got from Clarence Hicks? Did his head bang on the field? Was that a torquing of the neck? Those are all questions that we know with head coach Mike O'Shea. You're not going to get anything. You may get a tidbit that he's not going to play, but that's about it.
Yeah, they haven't even declared whether it's upper body or lower body at this point. It's pretty clear from watching what the injured area is. Zach Collaros probably, in hindsight, should not have started this last week against the Toronto Argonauts, given the hit he took the previous week. He completed 50% of his passes. He was 5 for 10. It wasn't a great look. Hopefully, again, we want to see these star players on the field. You hope it's not something long-term. The Bombers are in a bit of a tough spot because they're not that front runner that they had been in previous seasons. Now, they are a game better at this point than they were a year ago. They're at 500. Last year, they were 2-4 through their first 6 games. Well, you've got a much improved Calgary Stampeders now in the West. They're neck and neck with the BC Lions for numbers of wins as well. So if he's out longer term, you got to start worrying about those playoff spots. The crossover, of course, is still in play, given that Toronto and Ottawa have 3 wins combined between the two of them. But you've got to keep that in mind and make sure you're protecting the player, but not letting that playoff chance slip away.
If you take his season so far, he is 2-3. Chris Streveler won the only game that he started. Collaros, other than his first game in Winnipeg, where after the suspension, where he lit up Edmonton, he has not looked great since. He had one night where he was stellar, but he's been decent, but not the Zach Collaros that we've seen in the past. Doesn't mean that there was a nagging injury impacting him then, but age is going to catch up to you. He's in that sort of sweet spot of, do I retire? Do I not? He mused about it. But now that this neck injury, and you could see on the sideline, he could not twist his head if his life depended on it. He was struggling with that neck. If it's a sprained neck, my goodness, that's going to take a while to recover from. He is at that point in his career where everything that happens to him is just going to take longer because he's taken so many beatings over his time. And that goes for any football player.
The Bombers do have the full week to prepare with Chris Streveler as their starting quarterback, much like they had for game 1 of the season. They knew going into that one, Collaros was suspended, wasn't going to be able to play. I'm wondering, though, if Strevler struggles out of the gate in this one. Does Terry Wilson get some more prominent playing time? They've been pretty high on him, how they speak about Terry Wilson, but he hasn't really had a lot of on-field opportunities as of yet.
He stepped on the field in the Grey Cup and didn't look good there, but that's a high-pressure situation. I'm wondering if that would be the case, because you can't have Strevler just take the ball under his arm and run all the time, because eventually he's just going to get beat up doing that. He's not a great passer. He makes the odd one that you think, wow, that was spectacular, but he's also made some passes and decisions that you scratch your head. Like, why did he throw that? Strevler is a great team guy. He's a decent quarterback, but he's not a Zach Collaros back there. He doesn't orchestrate the offense the same way, and they have to change everything to allow for it. And that means more Brady Oliveira. Well, you don't think the defenses on the other side are going to start cluing in?
One more quarterback to talk about, the rejuvenated Calgary Stampeders and Vernon Adams Jr. He was placed into concussion protocol, has returned to practice, so that's got to be a good sign for the Stampeders. And again, hoping to see VA back on the field.
You hope for the Stampeders that that's the case. Dave Dickinson discussed just before we came to air that he thought that there was a good chance, if everything goes according to plan and he gets all the approvals, that he would be playing against Ottawa. PJ Walker, wow. You could see the nerves and you could see the fear in his eyes as he went out to try to win that game against the Montreal Alouettes. He was not ready for prime time at that moment. He's got to be better if he's going to be the backup. You cannot throw balls 10 to 15 meters or 20 yards over the receiver's head and expect them to catch it. Nobody's got a ladder that tall on the field. He really struggled in the big moment there to give the Stampeders a chance. That's why they need Vernon Adams Jr., because he's done everything. And when he went around the edge and took off to make that run, everybody in my household shuddered. What is he doing? And then he didn't slide. And you thought, uh-oh, this is not good.
He took a bit of a double whammy shot from Darnell Sankey and Tyrese Beverette. And those are two guys that you do not want to be sandwiched in between. A couple of really heavy hitters.
Sankey, to be fair to him, he could have given him a forearm shiver and he backed away from it. And that was, I thought, classy move by Darnell Sankey. And Beverette, that was a clean tackle. I thought the impact of the injury was more to the hip, to the back, but they said concussion. Well, having said that, though, if you're Vernon Adams Jr. and the fall off to PJ Walker, who hasn't had any experience, is so big, why are you taking that risk?
The quarterback slide is there to protect the player. You've got to be smart and use it. It's one thing if you're going late in the game to try to get a first down or to bust into the end zone. I understand going for the glory. We saw Bo Levi Mitchell going for the goal line in a play as well, something you don't see often. So I understand the competitiveness and the desire to make those big plays, but you've got to be smart about when you do it.
Oh, without a doubt. And we even saw Nick Arbuckle against the Blue Bombers on a 2nd and long take two defenders head on. He dove right into them to try to get the first down. Who's backing up Nick Arbuckle? You can't do this if you're the starting quarterback, especially when the fall off is that big. Now, Steve Daniel pointed out that the fall off hasn't been too big between the starters and the backups for the most part, but there are a couple of outliers out there. And this is the thing, like if you're Vernon Adams Jr., protect yourself so that your team, if you really believe that you can take the team somewhere, you got to be out there to play to make it happen. And if you're putting yourself in dangerous situations, you're not doing anybody any favors. I really did not approve of him not taking the slide, especially where he was in the field and how far he had to go for the first down. You weren't going to win. Now, talking about not winning, Dru Brown is coming back. And he took that hit from Deshaun Amos. Amos getting the max fine, no suspension, but max fine for that hit to the upper solar plexus and probably catching the grill and maybe concussing Dru Brown as he came around the edge when Hamilton played him. Dru Brown is back out again, and Ottawa's only chance of really pushing the Stampeders, if the weather is good, is with Dru Brown.
The fact that Dru Brown's chin strap wasn't tightened and the helmet flew off made the hit look really bad. But reviewing that play, it was a really bad hit. I think the 25-yard penalty was well-deserved, and I'm a little bit surprised that Deshaun Amos wasn't disqualified for the remainder of that game based on the severity of the hit. And again, it's Deshaun Amos took a lot of heat on social media for the hit as well. He came out to his own defense saying he's not a dirty player. I get where he's coming from. We've had years on this podcast talking about not dirty players crossing the line on a hit. And that was what I see in this situation as well. As I don't feel that Deshaun Amos is one that generally targets the head, goes after that big play. He saw an opening. His form was bad. He popped Dru Brown with the crown of his helmet, and he's suffering the penalties because of it.
Reddick Cramdy did it last year for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and guess who the victim was? Dru Brown. You lead with the crown, you're going to hurt somebody. There's not any illusion about this. And that's why I don't understand why they have to make this demarcation with 25 yards. Not many years ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3, you got a 25-yard foul on the field, you were automatically tossed. Now they've changed that a little bit to say it has to be malicious, it has to be a punch, it has to be something like that. And I don't like that. Once you cross that threshold from 15 to 25, you're gone. That's it. It doesn't matter what else you've done. You're gone right at that moment. And I wish the CFL would clean that up. That's one rule that was amended that didn't need to be amended. 25 means you're out of the game. Make it simple.
I can't argue with that at all. I fully support it. As I said, I'm surprised that he remained in the game after that one, as was Coach Bob Dice.
Steve Daniel, Associate Vice President with the CFL, in charge of football analytics, and I'm happy to be here on Third Down Gamble.
Start a review of the week that was, with the Calgary Stampeders hosting the Montreal Alouettes. The Alouettes, who had gone into Calgary the previous season and tied the Stampeders, but had also beaten them the last time they were there. Alouettes sneak one out, if you want to call it that. To be fair, Stampeders looked like they just weren't the same once Vernon Adams Jr. got injured. Their defense held up, again, only giving up the one touchdown, but McLeod Bethel Thompson, despite his, let's call it a rant against the CFL and TSN panel, he performed well enough for the Alouettes to win, and they did on a Jose Maltos Diaz 57-yard field goal late in the game. What a clutch kick.
Jose Maltos was doing his best Sergio Castillo impression with a 57-yarder, a franchise record by 3 yards for the Alouettes, and he probably could have hit from 60 to 62 yards. He had a lot of leg on that one, right down the middle. A perfect 5 for 5 on a night where the offense only found the end zone once. He was the difference maker in this one, and the Alouettes came from behind, shutting out the Stampeders 9-0 in the fourth quarter to pull out the win. As you said, once Vernon Adams Jr. left the game, the momentum shifted and the Alouettes converted on their scoring opportunities. The Stampeders couldn't move the ball.
Maltos hit 3 field goals in that final quarter. You miss any one of them and we're looking at a different result. That shows you how important place kicking is in this Canadian league. The Montreal Alouettes was a huge win. They've been sort of the team to watch, though. If you want to watch the last 3 minutes of a game and you want to see which team is going to be there, well, dial up Montreal first, because they're probably the ones that are going to give you the most excitement. 2 games that they've finished with a 1-point result. Now they get a 2-point result. The Alouettes are a dynamite team to watch. They've got a fantastic defense, but boy, they love leaving it to the last second.
McLeod Bethel Thompson, as you mentioned, 30 for 40, 75% completion, 280 yards. So lots of shorter passes. His longest pass of the night was only 25 yards, but he did what he had to do to get them in position, and Maltos delivered the points.
They left the long pass to Caleb Evans, who made a 42-yard completion for the Alouettes. And there are a lot of people that wonder why Caleb Evans, who is a little bit more dynamic back there, doesn't get the start. But you can't argue McLeod Bethel Thompson's numbers and his career and also his experience. Vernon Adams Jr., 15 to 25, 193, a typical Vernon Adams Jr. night where he throws for a lot of yards every time he completes it. But PJ Walker, 3 of 7 for 20. And of course, the last 2 that he threw in the football game sailed incomplete. Montreal, that was a big, I think, statement game for them in the sense that they took out the top team in the West in their park with a big crowd on hand as well. Thank you very much, but we are a good team in the East.
They are. This gets them back in the mix with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who are red hot. The Alouettes got off to the really good start, lost a couple in a row, allowing the Tiger Cats to surpass them in the standings. Now they're neck and neck. This one could be a real race for that home field playoff game.
It could be. These are the 2 teams right now that are standing up and taking off. Ticats, of course, when we get to them, it's an amazing run that they're on. But for the Alouettes, talk about their defense. And one of the things that I've chided Noel Thorpe over is his drop off. He tends to pull everybody back when the Alouettes get the lead. Well, he didn't do that this time against PJ Walker. He sent safety blitzes. He sent everything. Sort of the same thing he did the last week against the Toronto Argonauts, where he went right after Nick Arbuckle when the game was on the line. I like that approach. If that's the approach that got you the lead, stay with it. And he's got the horses to do anything he wants out there. He doesn't have to sit back in a safety net and hope that they don't throw it over the top. It
was a great call, especially with PJ Walker coming in relief. Alouette's defense didn't give him an opportunity to settle in and get comfortable. If he gets in and he completes 3 or 4 passes right away, even if they're only 5 to 10 yards, maybe a 12-yarder, he starts to get into a rhythm. He starts to get a feel for the game. But when you're putting that kind of pressure on him right from the start, it did not allow him to settle in at all. And we see the end result on the scoreboard. And with his passing numbers, they just weren't there. They didn't allow it. 3 completions for 20 yards is a pretty rough night. We move to Friday night, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders hosting the Edmonton Elks. Another big crowd on hand in Regina, almost 28,000. This was sort of Christmas in July because it was the 25th. I thought it was a great little promotion. The Rough Riders get out to a 21-4 lead and basically coast the rest of the way, not really doing too much in the second half, not too concerned about what could be happening until Keon Julian Grant goes for a big touchdown, and suddenly the Elks are back in the football game. They were, and as we talked about, the biggest difference maker in this game was the defensive line play by the Saskatchewan Roughriders. 8 sacks on Cody Fajardo helped snuff out the comeback attempt. There was 3 players that had 2 sacks each. Micah Johnson had 2, Shane Ray had 2, Malik Carney had 2, and then you've got CJ Rivas pitching in with 1 and AJ Allen pitching in with the other one. So a real strong effort by that Saskatchewan defense to not allow the Elks to come all the way back. 2 sacks to end the game basically snuffed out any chances. But for Saskatchewan, this pulling back on the throttle on offense, they really did nothing in that fourth quarter. In fact, when you see the wave going around Mosaic Stadium, you know the Rough Rider offense isn't doing much. They won the game. That's great. But they're not looking great doing it. And I think that's something that's going to have to be addressed, is that this was a team they could have put away and they let them back in. One high note for the Rough Riders, Sam Emelis is back looking to be in fine form. Targeted 6 times. He had 6 catches for 113 yards and a touchdown. He's a big part of that Saskatchewan offense. So great to see him healthy and performing. AJ Ouellette led the rushing attack, 15 carries for 62 yards. He's been solid, but he seems to have slowed down a little bit from the pace he was on early on in the season. So we'll have to continue to watch whether the Rough Riders can keep that running game going. We talked earlier about the lack of running attack by the Edmonton Elks, managing only 25 yards on the ground. So a pretty rough night running the ball for Edmonton. Well, and when Cody Fajardo has 20 of those 25 yards, Justin Rankin goes 3 times for nothing. It goes back to where we were in first down. They've got to address this somehow. Trevor Harris, again, completes over 70% of his passes, 25 of 33 for 268 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Harris, that's the 10th game in a row he's gone 70% or better in his passing completion. That's pretty stout. For Cody Fajardo, not a bad night himself. 26 of 33 for a 79% completion rate, 346 yards, 2 touchdowns. You look at the numbers and you think, well, Elks obviously played with the Rough Riders right up to the end. Well, they kind of did, but it came in fits and starts, and it came in the fourth quarter for the Elks when they finally found Julian Grant and then got down the field and scored a touchdown. In fact, they hadn't crossed midfield other than the Julian Grant long touchdown, but once in that whole second half until they came within 3.
You look at some big offensive numbers, as you said, for Cody Fajardo passing the ball. He also lost 64 yards on the 8 sacks. So you're taking away over half of a field just on the quarterback getting smoked. And those are pretty tough numbers to recover from. I know Steve Daniel has talked in the past about the few times a team can score a touchdown when they have been sacked on that offensive drive. And when you're knocked back 8 times for 64 yards, that's a pretty tough slog.
Now for Brett Lothar, he goes 2 of 3 in this football game, but the big note for him is that he hit one finally over the 50 yards, which has been a trouble spot for him. He nails one, and that will help his confidence. But Cody Grace, he has 10 punts. He averaged 52.4 yards per punt. Did he ever have a night punting the ball for the Edmonton Elks? He was just spectacular out there.
I was worried about their punting game with Jake Julian heading south of the border this past offseason, but Cody Grace has stepped into that role, and they're not really missing a beat.
It's not something that you highlight too much because if you're doing a lot of punting, obviously your offense is going 2 and out or something akin to that. Cody Grace, though, great free agent signing out of Calgary.
After a 3-0 start to the season, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have now lost 3 in a row, evening their record at 500. The Toronto Argonauts hosted the Bombers at BMO Field, really didn't look threatened at all in this one and came away with a 31-17 win. As mentioned earlier, Zach Collaros knocked out of the game early, 5 for 10 for 79 yards. 2 of those incompletions were also interceptions. So rough night for Zach Collaros. The Argonauts get their second win of the season.
Big play for the Toronto Argonauts was Janarian Grant throwing an option pass down the field to DeMonte Coxey. That sort of set the tone for what the Argos were going to do that night. They weren't going to back down from Winnipeg at all. Toronto took the lead early, 25-10, though, by the time halftime rolled around. Chris Starvler in the third quarter throws 1 touchdown pass to Jared Stearns, but it's the only thing that the Blue Bombers do in the second half. Granted, there was rain coming down almost the entire game. A huge relief, to be quite honest, for Toronto because they were under a humidex warning going into that game. It was so hot down there. I think the rain, you could tell by the players and the coaches on the sidelines, they weren't covering against it. They rather enjoyed the respite.
Given the injury to Dalton Schoen now being placed on the 6-game injured list, we saw Cody Case step in to that role.
And then Cody Case gets carried off the field and his leg gets carried with him, unfortunately. That was a horrific look.
It was. And Trey Vauvel has been the return specialist so far this season. When he gets the ball, he runs angry and upfield, but he's had a tough time getting a handle on that ball as it bounces around. Given those 2 situations, I would not be surprised to see Dylan Mitchell come off the practice roster and step in. He can be a sure-handed receiver, replacing Schoen and now Case. He also is capable of on the return game, so it might be a prime time to bring Dylan Mitchell into the fold.
It's their offense that is just not doing anything. Even with Zach Collaros in there, outside of the opening game where they went off, they have not put up big numbers. Scoring 17 points is not going to win you many games in the Canadian Football League, and they're not getting close. In the fourth quarter, the Stampeders rolled up 17 and ran away with it. They beat them big in Calgary. Now the Argonauts have beaten them big in Toronto. Winnipeg is starting to look like they're part of the pack.
They are. They've certainly come back to it from where they were over the previous few seasons. DeMonte Coxey had a big night again for the Argonauts. 6 catches, 145 yards and a touchdown. He's leading that receiving core week to week. They've got some other guys. Tavares Daniels, the wily veteran, will come up with big catches when needed. Kevin Mittal has been, I think, the biggest surprise on that offense this year as well. He has had some pretty big plays. So a lot of confidence right now to get that win out of the way for the Argos. A tough test, though, as we know, they've got a back-to-back, and they'll be playing at Princess Auto Stadium this coming week.
Nick Arbuckle goes 22 of 31 for 316, 2 touchdowns. Chris Streveler, 11 of 18 for 148 and 1 touchdown. Of course, as you mentioned, Zach Claris with 2 interceptions. One of them was a doink, 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 doink that was picked off by the goal line, and that's when Claris left the game. He wasn't contacted on the play, but that was it. It was a real shock to me when they announced that he wasn't coming back to play at halftime. The word came up to the TSN announcers. And I thought, what is going on here? Clearly, he wasn't right going into that football game, and best to protect him. We talked about Vernon Adams Jr. Well, hey, what is Winnipeg without Zach Collaros?
Finishing off the week, the Hamilton Tiger Cats continue to roll with their 5th straight win going into BC and beating the Lions 37-33. A late comeback by the Tiger Cats, a bit of a letdown for the Lions. Bo Levi Mitchell continues to be on form and led a big comeback at the end.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats are fun to watch. They had so many weapons going for them. And you remember last year that Ticats beat the BC Lions in overtime in BC. Now, we had talked a little bit about the start time, but the fact that it was 7 o'clock Eastern, that was a normal nighttime game for the Ticats. The roof was open, which meant it was going to be a little bit cooler. BC, nothing to be ashamed of other than they didn't win the game. What a great, fun game to watch. If you love offense, that was the game this weekend to watch. If you wanted a crazy finish, you went to Montreal and Calgary. The CFL had a little bit of everything this week. It was just amazing to sit back and just go for the ride when these two went and clawed at each other.
It was really back and forth as well. I don't want to say that the Lions got out to a big lead and blew it. That fourth quarter, there was 27 points total scored, 10 by the Lions, 17 by the Tiger Cats, and that was the difference.
Mike Benavidez, love him or not, he put in, especially after that first touchdown, when Brandon O'Leary-Orange got that deep ball from Bo Levi Mitchell to put the Ticats within 3, he went into a soft zone after that when the Ticats got the ball back. Bo Levi Mitchell, he's been around long enough to realize that, well, if they're covering deep, I'm just going to go underneath and 10 at a time. And that's what he did. Marched down the field. In fact, almost did it too fast. Fortunately for them, they didn't score the touchdown with Keandre Smith the first time. Was he open for the game-winning touchdown that second time? What happened to that BC defense that you leave a receiver by himself in the end zone?
One play we need to give the BC Lions defense for is probably the best interception that you will see in professional football. Robert Carter Jr. made an absolute steal, one-handed grab interception. This one you're going to see replayed throughout the year and for years to come. It's not often that it's a defensive player that gets the catch of the year. This is the front runner right now.
It's unbelievable. He is coming from behind. He jumps up, gets the one hand on it, and he's done this in college. There's video of him doing it in college as well. But he gets that football and he does a tuck to protect the ball, protect himself. And he never touches O'Leary-Orange at all during the entire sequence. What an unbelievable play. This is why CFL football is so great. You've got talented people doing amazing things. Bo Levi Mitchell, if you want to know his line, 34-41, 389 yards. He does throw a pick, but he throws 3 touchdowns. His longest one, of course, was a touchdown pass to Brendan O'Leary-Orange. Nathan Rourke, he has nothing to be ashamed of. 20-27 for 289 yards. He doesn't get an interception. He doesn't get a touchdown. The Lions were there right to the end, and I listened to his post-game press conference. You could just tell that it was just eating at him, that when they had the chance, not the very last drive, but the one just before that, when they had the chance to chew up some clock and maybe prevent Hamilton from coming back, that they didn't get it done. That's a competitive spirit, and I love it in him. He's going to figure this out. From the previous game that they played in BC, They had video of him sitting out in the stadium by himself for about a half an hour afterwards, just mulling over everything that went on. And one of the things that they've talked about is he's so hard on himself. You got to let go of some of this stuff because sometimes it just isn't within your control.
And this is the Nathan Rourke that we were expecting to see this season as well. It took him a little bit to get rolling. He's had some games that are starting to rack up that yardage. This was that star quarterback that we were expecting to see. So good for the BC Lions to have him in there. They just have to close it out in the fourth quarter. Unfortunately for them, Bo Levi Mitchell has seen it all and was unfazed in leading the winning touchdown drive.
Let's give credit to James Butler. 16 carries for 115 yards, 2 touchdowns on the night. His mom happened to be there, which was great for her to celebrate with him. The Lions are getting a balanced attack. It's something that we would have thought was going to happen when Buck Pierce left Winnipeg, that the Lions were going to start incorporating what he had been so successfully accomplishing in Winnipeg. And we're starting to see it. It just didn't come out as a victory. I put this one on the Lions defense. They really didn't have an answer. Every time BC did something, Hamilton had a response. Well, at some point, you got to say, whoa, that's enough. We're going to not let you pass.
Third down.
Kicking off the week with some Thursday night football, the Calgary Stampeders are in Ottawa to take on the RedBlacks. The Stampeders are a 4.5-point favorite on the road. This one comes down to healthy quarterbacks and their ability to step into the game. Do we see Vernon Adams Jr.? Do we see Dru Brown complete the games? Are we looking at some backups? Those are some questions that need to be answered. It's a tough one to call at this point.
If it comes down to backup quarterbacks, I would take Dustin Crum over PJ Walker right now, because Dustin Crum has put up better numbers this season and won a football game, the only one that Ottawa has won. For the Stampeders, it is Vernon Adams Jr. If he isn't playing, what do? PJ Walker will have to perform, and this will be his audition tape. This is it. You're here for a reason. They believe in you. You got to go out there and perform. Ottawa down 4.5 at home. Ooh, that's a harsh one. If it's Vernon Adams Jr., I'm good with it. If he's not out there, I'm not good with it. One thing I can probably attest to is that this game will not break 40 points.
I'm going to take the Ottawa RedBlacks to keep this one close. I think that you've raised some good points there. I don't believe Vernon Adams is going to be 100% healthy. We're likely to see PJ Walker for at least some of this game. That to me spells the RedBlacks given the opportunity to stay in it. I don't know if I'm picking the RedBlacks to win outright at this point. I do think that they beat that 4.5-point spread.
Friday night, it's the Toronto Argonauts in Winnipeg in another of these back-to-back games. We know that Zach Collaros is not going to be playing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that night. How does that change the line? Don't know, because the Bombers are 6.5-point favorites at home. Now, that's an inherent bias built into the fact that Winnipeg's at home and that crowd stifles any play calling by the other team when they come to audible at the line. Seriously? 6.5, given that it's not Zach Collaros as your quarterback?
I love the confidence. I like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at home. They are a tough team to beat there. They need to get Brady Oliveira more engaged in this offense as well. He had a 6.2 yards per carry average in the last game, and they went away from him. He had 13 carries in total. He needs to see the rock more. You've got Nick Dembski having a great season, especially for a guy, I'm not going to say he's old, but for a guy his age, he's had a pretty great start to the season as well. Look for those two to keep rolling. Do we see Terry Wilson getting some meaningful snaps? Is this Strevler's to run? Time will tell, but I'm taking the Blue Bombers to win it. We know back-to-backs are tough to win them both. So I like the Bombers to reverse it and get that win at home.
I don't. I like the Argonauts on the road. They've had the Winnipeg Blue Bombers number, whether it's Grey Cups or not. They've been beating the Bombers wherever they play. This crowd will be slightly smaller. They won't be a probably a sellout because of what's been happening with the Blue Bombers the last couple of weeks. There's going to be some dissatisfaction over that. You read Twitter, you certainly can see it, that people are upset, asking what's gone wrong with this football team. Toronto's, I like them. Whether they win the game is another question, but 6.5, I do not like that spread.
Saturday doubleheader. Game 1 has the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Edmonton taking on the Elks. Ticats are a 4.5-point favorite on the road. Given what we've seen from that Tiger Cats offense, not an unreasonable spread.
Hamilton Tiger Cats went into Edmonton last year and beat them. That's when Trey Ford really wowed the crowd, when he came in the second half and started checking touchdowns all over the place to bring Edmonton back into the mix. But Hamilton right now is the team. 5 straight wins. They haven't done that since their Grey Cup run of 2019 when they faced the Blue Bombers in Calgary. Lost that one big, but that was the last time that they have put 5 in a row together. Edmonton, they are, as Cody Fajardo said, they're not in panic mode yet, but they're getting close. You're losing touch with the teams that you need to catch. You have to find something somewhere to break through and make a statement and say, yeah, we're in the mix in the West. And one win isn't going to keep you in that conversation. 4.5-point favorite for the Tiger Cats. If they put up the numbers that they did against BC in Edmonton, Ticats are good for this cover.
I'm going the other side on this one, sticking with the home teams this week. I believe Edmonton has some fight left in them. Much like the RedBlacks game, I don't necessarily think they're going to come out with the win, but they will keep it close. And you never know, if they can keep within touch of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, strange things can happen. So I like the Elks to beat that 4.5-point spread.
I'm not saying that the Elks are out of the equation and they don't have fight. What I am saying is that if they don't start making noise now, it ain't going to be part of any conversation. We finish with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. The Alouettes, 2.5-point underdogs against the Roughriders in this one. Saskatchewan, their defense is looking amazing. So is Montreal's. Probably a low-scoring game. This is going to be a great test for Trevor Harris, who was an Alouette not long ago. Of course, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who is now the quarterback of consequence for the Alouettes.
The Alouettes being a 2.5-point dog at home is shocking to me in this one. You look at the results last week, both teams won close games. Which was more impressive? Montreal eking one out against Calgary on the road, or Saskatchewan surviving one against the Edmonton Elks at home? I'm taking the Alouettes to win this one outright. So I don't think that 2.5-point underdog comes into play here at all. I think it's a win.
The Roughriders went into Montreal last year and lost. They started strong, and the Alouettes came back in that fourth quarter to beat them. Granted, that was Davis Alexander that did it at that time. We don't know if Samuel Emelis is going to be in the lineup because he did get injured in that game against Edmonton. The Roughriders are getting deeper and deeper and deeper into that receiving core. Might just finally catch up to them, especially with a Montreal defense that if you don't run the right route, they are going to run it for you and they're going to intercept it.
Marc-Antoine Dequoy is always lying in wait for an interception. Hasn't had the numbers yet this year. He's been close on a couple, so don't be surprised if Trevor Harris is a little bit off the mark. Dequoy comes down with one. And
you've got KB and Ento back there, who's basically a vacuum cleaner. That ball gets anywhere near him, he's going to have it. You're right, Dequoy, it's interesting. He had such an amazing year last year in fact, the last 2 years of returning long touchdowns on interceptions. This year, nothing. This could be his breakout game. I kind of like the Alouettes to defeat the cover in this one. I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson is getting more comfortable. He had a very strong game in Calgary. Looked good at what he did. He certainly struggled at the start, but he settled in. And the one thing that I'll give Thompson credit for is that he knows how to read defenses. If he sees something out there, he can figure it out. Not all quarterbacks are great at that, but he is.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.